They say some crimes are so clever, they almost get away with themselves. Albert Walker believed he had committed the perfect murder, a crime so meticulously planned, so flawlessly executed, that no one would ever connect him to the man who vanished beneath the Atlantic waves. Charming, intelligent, and utterly convincing, he lived for years under stolen identities, weaving a web of lies so intricate it ensnared investors, friends, family, and even his own daughter. He thought he was beyond suspicion, but at 5 a.m. on a quiet morning off the coast of Devon, two fishermen hauling in their nets would pull up more than just cod and mackerel. They pulled up a body, a man with no identification, a Rolex watch still ticking on his wrist, and a secret that would unravel a decade-long saga of fraud, betrayal, and cold-blooded murder. The discovery was both eerie and surreal. The body was remarkably well preserved, encased in a weighted sack, wrapped in rope, and anchored to the seabed. Dressed in a long-sleeved shirt, trousers, and brown shoes, the man showed no signs of struggle, only silence. His pockets had been turned inside out, as if someone had searched them thoroughly before dumping him into the ocean. There was no wallet, no phone, no clue to who he might be. Police initially assumed it was a tragic accident, perhaps a sailor lost overboard during a storm, or a stowaway who fell from a cargo ship crossing the English Channel. But something felt off. The precision of the binding, the weight of the anchor, the deliberate removal of all personal items. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. Then came the first clue, a tattoo on the back of the right hand. At first glance, it looked like a cluster of stars, a random constellation inked in faded black. But upon closer inspection, forensic experts realized it was not random at all. It was a maple leaf, small, subtle, almost poetic. A Canadian symbol, a whisper of identity from a life far away. Still without a name, the investigation stalled. Days passed, then weeks, until one officer working late remembered the Rolex. The watch, though waterlogged, had stopped at exactly 3:15 a.m., its hands frozen in time. On instinct, he contacted Rolex headquarters in London. Within hours, a breakthrough. The serial number matched a service record for a man named Ronald Joseph Platt, last seen in Essex, England. The company confirmed the watch had been serviced just months before his disappearance. Without that single detail, the persistence of a mechanical timepiece, Ronald Platt might have remained a John Doe forever. Police traced Platt's last known address to a modest flat in Basildon. His landlord remembered him vaguely, a quiet man, often absent, involved in business ventures abroad. He provided a contact, David Davis, listed as a personal referee. Davis was everything one might expect of a respectable businessman. Articulate, well-dressed, calm under questioning. He spoke of loans he'd made to Platt, joint investments in France, and even sent a photograph of himself standing beside a vintage car, smiling confidently. Everything about him screamed legitimacy. He claimed Platt had simply disappeared during a trip overseas. No foul play suspected. Just another man who vanished into thin air. But fate has a way of intervening in the most ordinary ways. An officer attempting to deliver paperwork knocked on what he thought was David Davis's house. Instead, a woman answered, confused, nervous. She said she didn't know any David Davis, but she did recognize the photo. "That's not David," she said. "That's Ronald Platt." A chill ran through the station. Davis wasn't Davis, and Platt wasn't missing. He was dead, and someone had taken his place. This accidental visit, a wrong door, a mistaken address, became the spark that ignited a transatlantic investigation spanning 3,000 miles and nearly a decade of deception. Forensic teams scoured records, cross-referenced financial transactions, and dug into international databases. Fingerprints once lifted from a passport application under the name David Davis were run through Interpol. The match was undeniable. The man posing as Platt was actually Albert Johnson Walker, a fugitive from Canada, wanted for embezzling millions of dollars from elderly investors, widows, and retirees who trusted him with their life savings. Walker had not merely stolen Platt's identity, he had stolen his entire life. He had befriended Platt and his girlfriend, Elaine Boyce, presenting himself as a charismatic entrepreneur with grand visions of wealth. Together, they formed a shell company with Platt and Elaine as directors, unwitting pawns in a scheme designed to launder money and build false credibility. Walker promised them luxury homes in France, offshore accounts, European citizenship. But behind the scenes, he was siphoning funds, forging documents, and preparing his next move. In 1991, he lured Platt and Elaine to Canada, claiming new opportunities awaited. Elaine struggled to adapt, isolated, lonely, increasingly dependent on Walker. Meanwhile, Walker began to distance himself, disappearing for days at a time. By 1992, he had vanished completely, reappearing months later in England under the alias David Davis, married to a much younger woman named Sheena, who rarely spoke, never questioned his past, and seemed to live in a state of quiet submission. For 4 years, Walker lived comfortably in Devon, attending church, volunteering at local charities, and cultivating an image of the model citizen. No one suspected the quiet man who gave sermons at Bible study had blood on his hands. But in 1995, danger loomed. The real Ronald Platt was due to return to Britain, a return that would expose Walker's elaborate charade. Faced with exposure, Walker took action. He invited Platt aboard his yacht, the Lady Jane, under the pretense of catching up, of friendship, of closure. They set sail into the North Atlantic. What happened next was pieced together through tide charts, GPS logs, and forensic science. Platt was struck on the head, likely while sleeping, bound with nylon rope, placed in a canvas sack, and weighted down with a heavy iron anchor. At precisely 3:15 a.m., the body was dropped into the sea. The murder was clinical, silent, almost invisible, but not flawless, because small things survive even the deepest waters. The Rolex, sealed against pressure, kept ticking until submersion. The anchor, sold months later at a car boot sale in a sleepy Cornish village, bore deep scratches that perfectly matched the ligature marks on Platt's wrists. When police recovered it, they found traces of saltwater residue and human hair caught in the rusted metal. DNA testing confirmed it belonged to Platt. And then there was the tattoo, the maple leaf, which led investigators to old immigration records proving Platt had visited Canada in the early 1990s. That trail led to Walker. Surveillance footage placed Walker purchasing supplies the day before the voyage. Phone records showed calls between Walker and Platt in the 48 hours before the yacht departed. And financial audits revealed massive transfers, hundreds of thousands of pounds, funneled through offshore accounts under multiple aliases. On October 31, 1996, Essex police moved in. Walker was arrested at his home, calm and composed, carrying passports under both names. David Davis and Ronald Platt, along with bundles of cash, gold bars, and forged documents. In a hidden safe, detectives found priceless paintings, stacks of foreign currency, and letters from terrified investors begging for their money back. His wife, Sheena, stood silently by as officers led him away. She would later testify that she knew nothing of the murder, but admitted living in fear of her husband for years, too afraid to ask questions. The trial began in June 1998 at Southend Crown Court. The prosecution painted Walker as a predator who used charm as a weapon, manipulating everyone around him with chilling precision. Elaine Boyce took the stand, her voice trembling as she described how Walker isolated her, controlled every aspect of her life, and spun fantasies of wealth that never existed. She spoke of waking up alone in Canada, realizing she had been abandoned, and spending years searching for answers. Sheena Walker, his daughter, testified that on the night of the murder, her father told her he was going fishing. She believed him. Only later did she learn the truth, that the man she called Dad was a con artist, a thief, and a killer. Walker, ever the performer, took the stand in his own defense. With practiced ease, he explained away every piece of evidence. The blood on the yacht? A shaving accident. The anchor? Borrowed for a weekend fishing trip? The Rolex? A gift from a grateful client. He smiled. He nodded. He spoke softly, convincingly, as if justice were merely a misunderstanding to be talked away. But the jury saw through the mask. After just 2 hours of deliberation, they returned a verdict. Guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years. Even then, he showed no remorse, only quiet arrogance, as if the system had somehow cheated him. While behind bars, he continued to write letters, charm prison staff, and maintain a bizarre sense of dignity as though he were a misunderstood genius rather than a convicted murderer. In 2005, after serving 9 years in the UK, Walker was extradited to Canada to face charges of fraud and theft. There, he was sentenced to additional time for swindling over $20 million from more than 100 victims. To this day, he remains incarcerated, a ghost of the man who once fooled the world. This is Thrillcom, the best. For more shocking tales of deception, murder, and the criminals who almost got away, stay tuned to Thrillcom, where the truth is stranger than fiction.